This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, good morning again. This is our Wandering Through the Big Book session number 8. And it's the second part of Bill's story. And I want to acknowledge at the very beginning that so Robin and I have been doing this, working our way through 52 weekly meditations that are in a book called The 12 Steps and the Spiritual Exercises of St. Ignatius. And one of the things that St. Ignatius did, this is a Spanish soldier that developed a relationship with God and wrote out these spiritual exercises, just like you would go to the gym or do mental exercises. These are spiritual exercises for the spirit. And one of the things that he would do was to use our power of imagination to immerse ourselves in a biblical scene. He would have you read a passage from the Bible and then really try to observe what's going on, to hear what's going on, to even taste and smell what's going on, and just to try to immerse yourselves in the scene. And then he'll ask a bunch of questions, and he's really just trying to get our minds more flexible. And so we're calling this session Bill's Story Part 2. Bill overcomes his contempt prior to investigation. And so what I'm hoping to do is to get us into this scene, because here's Bill, he's bottomed. He says something about the deep morass of self-pity stretched all around him. He's really feeling horrible. And right in the middle of that, his old drinking buddy, his old schoolmate, Ebby Thatcher, calls and then shows up at the apartment. And so there's Ebby, and Bill says things like fresh skinned and glowing, and Bill says, well, how soon can we get drinking? And Ebby says, oh, I'm not drinking. And I think it said Bill was aghast. He's like, what do you mean you're not drinking? This is our way of life. And what's going on? And then Ebby just says, I got religion, and then Bill's reaction again is, oh, wow, he's suffering from alcoholic insanity, and now he's insane about religion, and he's going to go on, and you're going to hear what's going through his mind. And the reason I think this is important is that Bill several times will cling to his own point of view and express his own point of view, and his clinging to that point of view will prevent him experiencing higher power in any real, not theoretical way. And the spiritual appendix is very clear at the very end of it that the only thing that will prevent you from developing a relationship with God is contempt prior to investigation, is us trying to justify our own thinking, rely on our own thinking, not be, I remember being struck early in the program when Step 11 said, on awakening, we are to ask God to direct our thinking, especially asking that our thinking be divorced from self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motives. And I remember my mind going, what? What do you mean, ask God to direct my thinking? This is my territory. I'm not getting God in here to direct my thinking. That ain't the way this thing's going to work. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't even, my contempt prior to investigation was so intense. It was like, anyway, and today, I don't know that I feel God directing my thinking. I have come to a way that works for me, which is simply, when I ask God to direct my thinking, I hear me. And I hear me talking about me, worried about me, a whole, the typical human thing, a self-centered life. And so I wind up having to go, well, here's what I'm thinking. Can you give me an indication whether this is a good idea or a bad idea? And one of the things that's been coming up recently for me is this notion of asking God to reveal God's presence to me. So instead of, me trying to go find it, I'm asking God to reveal your presence to me. And I believe that ultimately step 11 is saying, God, will you please reveal your will for me here on planet Earth, your primary purpose for me here on planet Earth, and give me the power to pull that off. And then in accordance with that, with what Robin read, just to the extent that I try to ascertain what is your will for me, I acknowledge myself as a created being, I didn't make myself. And when I can get in that place of feeling I'm a created being, then I can say, I know what I want to do, because that's always loud and clear. What do you want me to do? And when I'm able to, and I think that's what step 10, we read that, what some people call the 10th step commandment. What's it say? How can I best serve thee? Thy will not mine be done. These are thoughts which must go with us all the frickin' time, all through the day. This is the only thing we're supposed to be thinking about. This is the proper use of the will. What a tall statement that is. But the promise is that just to the extent that I try to do that and keep that in my mind, I will be enabled, means it's not coming from me. I will be enabled to experience serenity right smack dab in the face of the calamity, that I can observe and experience the calamity, but I'm not gonna be thrown off my desire to do God's will for me. So anyway, I'm sorry, I've gone off, but so where we're picking up Bill's story is, I think it's page 10 in the book. And Candace, I really appreciate you printing it all out, but we're really just sticking to the book today. But the time's coming, so thank you for doing that. Let's see. Okay, so this is ridiculous. I got these pages and then I got notes all over it, so I hope I can actually read it. Okay, let's see. So Bill says, I was aghast. And then he talks about, he says this great line, bless his heart, bless Ebby's heart, let him rant about his religious BS. Besides, my gin will last longer than his preaching. There's some contempt prior to investigation. He's going, I can handle this. I got enough gin. It'll get me through, and I'll just let Ebby do his thing. But Ebby did no ranting. In a matter-of-fact way, he talked about these two men appearing in court and getting him out of trouble. One of those guys is Roland Hazard. He's going to show up when we do. I'm hoping we'll read There Is a Solution next week. He'll show up, and he's a key player. If he hadn't had this interaction with Carl Jung, if he hadn't come back to New York City and participated in these Oxford groups, if he hadn't gotten Ebby out of trouble and helped him get sober, Ebby never would have gone to Bill. Roland didn't go to Bill. Roland, I think they knew of each other, but that's part of the miracle of who we are as a fellowship. At any rate, so these two guys get him out of trouble. They had told they had told of a simple religious idea and a practical program of action. So it's always the same. It's a mental idea and it's physical action, stuff that we do. And it takes both of them. If it's just understanding and no action, 3 times the book says faith without works is dead. It just doesn't mean anything. It's just mental stuff until it manifests in action. And that's the feet on the ground part that we read. Head in the clouds, that's the understanding. Feet on the ground means I am immersed in the calamity. I'm not trying to avoid the calamity or manage the calamity or anything else. So anyway, but the simple religious idea, well, it's gonna show up later a lot. And that simple religious idea is this will not work on another person's conception of higher power, no matter who they are. It could be the Pope, and it's not going to work. That the only way I'm going to get into relationship with higher power is through my own conception of what the hell is behind all this. What's going on? What's my life about? Blah, blah, blah. All that stuff. But Bill's going to say, all it takes is my willingness to believe in my own conception of higher power, and I am on my way. And that's when he overcomes his contempt prior to investigation. You're going to hear all about his ideas, his spiritual ideas. And I just think it's brilliant when you read through it. And I just want to say, I don't know why, but I want to say, so, you read Bill's story and you get to the end and he says this wonderful line about how this simple talk in his kitchen has just, it's creating this genuine spiritual movement on planet Earth that has probably done more good for more lives than anything else. It's remarkable what it's done. And you get the idea that, wow, Bill has a spiritual experience and ain't life beautiful? Ain't life grand? Oh, wonderful. Well, this doesn't show up till later in the study guide, but just so you know, and especially if you're struggling yourself with different mental states within and you're feeling the roller coaster, the ups and the downs, the serenity, the Jesuits call it consolation and desolation. What great words. Consolation is when I'm feeling okay, purposeful, meaningful, loving, patient, tolerant, kind of all that stuff. Desolation is the desert. It's the basement. It's the, I don't know, it's where nothing seems to be going right. And they directly attribute it to when I'm in sync with God, I'm in consolation. When I'm out of sync with God, I'm in desolation, period. So anyway, Bill, I'll just read this. Bill and Lois took a 3-month tour of California from October 1943. So this is 8 years after June 10th, 1935, which is our beginning in terms of Bill and Bob forming the first group of Alcoholics Anonymous. 8 years later, so he's 8 years sober. Took a 3-month tour of California from October 1943 to January of 44. So October, November, December, January, a 4-month tour, go out to California. The tour was a personal uplift for Bill and a triumph for the fellowship. Hardly had they returned home when Bill was plunged into a depression so black that its effect on him was more debilitating than a physical assault. He was 9 years sober, and this dark and crippling depression would last 11 years. So next time you're feeling down and out, think about Bill having a guy commit suicide in his home. think about Bill getting this amazing and miraculous fellowship going and the book written, and they're working on the service structure and our traditions and all this stuff. And he goes into a depression so black that he can hardly do a thing. He actually did a lot, but so this is coming from his biography called Pass It On. And it's a whole chapter is devoted to this depression. And they give you comments from other people that watched him go through this. The only point is, it ain't all peaches and cream. You know, feet on the ground means we go through the mud. Feet on the ground means we don't gain power over our resentful minds, or our selfish minds, or our frightened minds, or our dishonest minds. This takes a long, steady run. And, you know, lately I've been interacting with some people who have been through treatment centers, and they've been through sober living and all of this stuff, but they haven't had long-term steady experience with local AA, and they don't stay. They don't stay involved somehow, and it just makes me so grateful. I went through the drudgery of local AA, you know, doing 9-10 meetings a week and reading everything I could, and I'm just so glad I did that, and not a separate kind of place, because my devotion really is to local AA. I'm getting off, but I love local AA, and that's all. So okay, so just 2 points before we go on. So above all, Bill believed that his depression was perpetuated by his own failure to work the AA steps. Isn't that something? That's what he said. And then he says this one thing at the very end, sobriety alone is insufficient to provide a comfortable life. Why all this pain? What have I done to merit this suffering? You know, he's trying to do a good thing. The answer I get is that pain, quite as much as pleasure, is in God's providence. Providence, I think that means that's God's territory, whether I'm going to experience pain or whether I'm going to experience pleasure. In the long run, everything evolves for the better, not because of pleasure, but because of pain. Wow, you know, here we are drinking to get out of our pain and to experience serenity. And he's saying sooner or later you're going to have to tackle the pain of meaninglessness, the pain of impatience, the pain of judgmentalism, the patience of selfishness. I mean, the pain of selfishness and the pain of fear, living in fear instead of living in love. And it's why it's that we read that line. So we ask God each morning in meditation to show us the way, because we don't find it on our own. We lack power on our own to actually experience. These are natural qualities of the spiritual being. They are not natural qualities of the human being. My humanness wants only to avoid pain and seek pleasure. And for me, I have struggled with self-doubt all my life. So second guessing whatever it is that I'm doing, except for AA. I have never second guessed AA right from the first day for me. But struggling with self-doubt has always been a big deal for me. So I keep going way off. Anyway, I just want you to know, you know, we're reading, oh wow, Bill's got a great relationship with God. Doesn't mean he had a great life. He did once he got out of that depression, but 11 years. Okay, so I'm back to Bill's story, and and Ebby passing along his experience to Bill. And so I'm looking at page 9 now. So Ebby says he had come to pass his experience along to me. That's at the bottom of page 9. If I cared to have it. I was shocked again. I was shocked, but interested. Certainly I was interested. I had to be, for I was hopeless. He talked for hours, and as he talked for hours, Bill remembers his relationship with his grandfather and things that his grandfather said to him that are part of our program. His grandfather said that he's fearless before he spoke of these things just before he died. That his denial of the preacher's right to tell him how he must listen to higher power. And then he talks about Bill in the middle of page 10. The wartime day in old Winchester Cathedral came back again. And if you want to just jump ahead, let's see where he says, well, I get, oh yeah, it's at the bottom of page 12. The real significance of my experience in the cathedral burst upon me, is what he says, burst upon me. I want to start. I want to start above that. Thus was I convinced that God is concerned with us humans when we want him enough. My hope is that one day I can look any of you in the eye and I can say, I have experienced the love of God and I know it's for real. I can recognize the many blessings that are in my life right here, right now. I am looking forward. I blame it on my mother. I never experienced my mother's love, so I have this idea that I just don't know what it's like. Maybe that's contempt prior to investigation. I don't know. But my goal is so when everybody says, all these different people say God is concerned about your life personally, on a personal level between you and God, my mind practices contempt prior to investigation, and I go, I hope you're right. I hope that's the truth. I can't tell you that I feel God's personal concern for me, although I can, sorry I do this, short lecture to be endured. I can see evidence of God's personal care for me all around me all the time. Well, no, not all the time, but I can see evidence of it. I can't say I feel it yet. It is a goal. Anyway, so I didn't want to jump around like this. So at the bottom of page 12, thus was I convinced that God is concerned with us humans when we want him enough. That's the willingness, when we want this thing. Most of us, any good alcoholic doesn't want anybody telling him what to do. And it doesn't matter whether it's you or me, but particularly God. We don't want God telling us what to do. We want to do what we want to do. We've been doing it all our lives. In fact, when the psychiatrists studied us in the 40s, they said the two characteristics that almost all of us had were defiance, a defiant personality. Tell me to do it and I won't. Tell me not to do it and I will, and then they called it grandiosity. I think it's self-centeredness, that I make everything about me. No matter what's going on out there, I make it about me, which makes it impossible for me to be altruistic or to worry about you. But so anyway, so back on page 12, thus was I convinced that God is concerned with us humans when we want God enough. At long last, I saw, I felt, I believed. He's overcoming contempt prior to investigation. I saw, I felt, I believed. Scales of pride and prejudice fell from my eyes. A new world came into view. And then he says, the real significance of my experience in the cathedral burst upon me. For a brief moment, I had needed and wanted God. There had been a humble willingness to have him with me, and he came. But soon the sense of his presence had been blotted out by worldly clamors. We'll get to it later, but that's what happens. We go back to the calamity. We go back to trying to solve the calamity instead of staying with the presence of God, which is the serenity part of it. And just bear in mind, I mean, I've understood this AA thing theoretically from an early time in here. And I've always been very good at telling you what to do. I've been pretty good at it. I have experienced some of it to a degree, but it's been in the last 2 years since coming out of my own depression, and particularly 22, this year has been the best year of my life. So I'm just trying to say, the first part of this is understanding what we're trying to do. And what we're trying to do, no matter what, is to form a working relationship with a power greater than our bodies and our minds. That's the whole thing. And what it's promising is, just to the extent that I do that, and I behave the way I think this relationship wants me to behave, if I will ask to be shown patience and tolerance and kindness and love, I'll be okay, and I'll feel meaning and purpose in spite of the war in Ukraine, in spite of ridiculously self-centered politicians, in spite of Bitcoin going to hell or whatever. I will experience the calamity with serenity. And what it takes is, what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say this takes practice. First, you got to understand, that's the faith part. Then you got to practice. It's why it's so brilliant that the steps end with practice these principles in everything you do. Try to be of service to life, and then practice these principles in everything. This takes practice. We all want the effect that alcohol had on us. We want to take a drink and boom, everything is beautiful. That's what we want. And that's not the way it happens. Bill had this dramatic experience right away, right at the get-go. And but that didn't keep him out of an 11-year depression. This is practice. So there's this other little Jesuit book that I'm into right now, and they have something they call the Examen, which is really their way of doing step 10. And they give these 5 steps to go through as you're looking at your life. And the first one is, there's a bunch of R's. The first one is relish the blessings that you feel are in your life. And the second one is request. And what you're to request is the grace of God. You're requesting that God reveal God's presence to you in your life. It gets more specific depending on what they're doing. The third one is review and reflect on whatever period of time you're looking at. They do it twice a day. So they do it at noontime, do it in the evening. Repent is number 4, which means to rethink, try to look at it. It's like being in the 4th column of the resentment inventory. Rethink, where have you been selfish, dishonest, or frightened with regard to this situation that you're putting in column 1. And then finally, resolve to live under the influence of your higher nature, your higher self, your higher power, whatever it is. And it's really, and the resolve part is resolve to accept the fact that this is not an overnight matter. You know, step 10 says, we have entered the world of the spirit. Our next function is to grow, not maintain our exalted spiritual condition, but to grow in understanding and effectiveness. This is not an overnight matter. The way alcohol was instant. And now we're trying to train ourselves to resolve to be patient and tolerant and kind and loving as we go forward, trying to live a different way. Anyway, okay, so let's see. So I jumped ahead. So, okay, so I'm back on page 10. In the middle of the page, I'd always believed in a power greater than myself. I'd often pondered these things. I was not an atheist. Few people really are. For that means the blind faith in the strange proposition that this universe originated in a cipher and aimlessly rushes nowhere. You know, you gotta ask yourself, am I simply random coincidence? Is my life here just a bunch of random, am I a random being based on, I don't know, the luck of the draw, the way, which of the little sperms got to the egg first? You know, am I just, is this whole thing random coincidence? And, you know, when you look at the way the world works, well, it sure doesn't make sense the way they're doing it. And poor old Jesus came in here 2,000 years ago saying, no, avoid retaliation or argument. Seek a kindly, tolerant view, you know. Don't apologize for God. Instead, let God demonstrate through you what God can do, you know, all that. Don't judge other people's conduct. Instead, ask God to mold your ideals and help us live up to the stuff that's on 67, 68, and 69. You know, a radically different worldview from what was going on. So, at any rate, so the few people are really, because that means blind faith in the strange proposition that this is just all a bunch of random stuff. Excuse me, I'm getting worked up. My intellectual heroes, the chemists, the astronomers, even the evolutionists suggested vast laws and forces at work. True or false? Do you see that? Despite contrary indications, I had little doubt. Now, this may not be true for you. I had little doubt that a mighty purpose and rhythm underlay all. That's a definition of God. That there is a mighty purpose and rhythm to our lives. How could there be so much of precise, immutable law and no intelligence? He's saying this isn't just physics. There's intelligence at work here as well. I simply had to believe in a spirit of the universe. Another great definition of God, the spirit underlying the entire universe. I had to believe in a spirit of the universe who knew neither time nor limitation, but that was as far as I had gone. You know, there's a wonderful line in the resentment section. To conclude that others were wrong was as far as most of us ever got. You know, I resent so-and-so because their behavior is making me miserable, and I stop. That's contempt prior to investigation at its worst. And what we do through that amazing 4-column inventory process is we dig in. We stop telling ourselves the lie that if you would change, I could be happy. and we start looking at what is the fear operating here, and what can I do about it? So, okay, that was as far as I had gone. Contempt prior to investigation. With ministers in the world's religions, I parted right there. Nobody's going to tell me what to do. When they talked of a God personal to me, who was love, superhuman strength and direction, what's he do? I became irritated, and my mind snapped shut against such a theory. Is that a good image of contempt prior to invest? Boom, nope, no way. I'm not believing that crap. Okay, now I'm finally getting to page 11. Got 5 minutes here. I guess we're not going to get done today. I love this, top of page 11. To Christ, I conceded the certainty of a great man, not too closely followed by those who claimed him. I'm not sure quite what that means, but I mean, he's saying people that believe him and are trying to be the same way, they're great. His moral teaching most excellent. Then look at this. For myself, I adopted those parts which seemed convenient and not too difficult. The rest I disregarded. There's a little contempt prior to investigation. I'm going to take what works for me and leave the rest, as they say in Al-Anon. The wars now here are all the reasons why not to believe. Here's the calamity causing him to reject serenity. The wars which had been fought, the burnings and chicanery that religious dispute had facilitated. And here's, honestly, religion's causing trouble. There's so many people of the Muslim faith that are convinced that's not what Muhammad intended, that, you kill anybody that doesn't believe and live the way you want it. Made me sick. I honestly doubted whether on balance the religions of mankind had done any good. There's a little contempt prior to investigation. I'm gonna look at the evidence, decide they're not doing any good. The Catholic Church has probably caused more harm than they have good, we say to ourselves. So I'm just gonna throw the whole thing out. It's why that line, be quick to see where religious people are right. Don't focus on where they're wrong. Try to pick up on where they're right and have it work for you. I honestly doubted whether on balance the religions of mankind had done any good, judging from what I had seen in Europe, in the war, and since the power of God in human affairs was negligible. That's true. You look around the world, the power of God is negligible in human affairs. Negligible. And our work is trying to make it less than negligible. No, more than whatever. Trying to make it, bring it in. The brotherhood of man, a grim jest. He is remarkable with his words. In very few words, he can give us a powerful image. If there was a devil, he seemed the boss universal, and he certainly had me. That I've learned the power of word substitution, and the Jesuits will talk about a good spirit and an evil spirit, and I just have to translate it to a loving spirit and a selfish spirit, because I think all of my difficulties show up as a result of my frightened selfishness. Selfishness, which for me means me first. Get out of my way. I'm coming through. What causes all my trouble is frightened selfishness. Well, I should add the third word, frightened, dishonest selfishness. I'm not honestly looking at the situation. And so I turn to self-centeredness, self-centered fear to solve whatever I think the problem is. But my friend so we have this concept of a turning point. It says it in How It Works. We stood at the turning point. They don't give you your only two alternatives. Those are back on page 25, because your only two alternatives, we read it, we read it this morning, doomed to an alcoholic death, trying to blot out of my mind how miserable I am, or seeking a relationship with God. Those are the only two alternatives we get. There is no middle of the road solution. And the turning point are those moments when I am presented with that choice and I try to make a choice. And most of us are powerless over that choice. That's the real problem. We lack power to choose God. So here's Bill, slightly drunk, I'm sure, sitting there with Ebby. Ebby's presenting a relationship with God as the solution to Bill's drunkenness. And Bill's aghast. Oh my God. Remembering stuff in his life, and just run through all this reasons why God can't exist. There can't be a loving God when we have wars and stuff. And there's Ebby. But my friend sat before me, and he made the point blank declaration that God had done for him what he could not do for himself, which is not drink. Lack of power is our dilemma. Lack of power to not resent. Lack of power to not live in fear. Lack of power to not feel remorse over our selfish behavior in the past or present. His human will had failed, this Ebby. Doctors had pronounced him incurable. Society was about to lock him up. Like myself, he had admitted complete defeat. That's the quit playing God part of the 3-part formula. Quit playing God, invite God in, do as directed. You do that, you get to match calamity with serenity. Like myself, he admitted complete defeat. Then he had, in effect, been raised from the dead, suddenly taken from the scrap heap to a level of life better than the best he had ever known. You think he's lying? Had this power originated in him? Obviously, it had not. There was no more power in him than there was in me at that minute, and that was none at all. That floored me. I gotta stop. So I was hoping we'd get through this, but we'll pick it up there next Sunday. And so I don't know. I don't know what I want to say. I can say to you that that 3 years ago I felt as bad about my life as I had ever felt, and I was stone sober, and I'd been in here 10 years, and the lessons that I learned from that are just monumental for me. And I'm just so, at this point, I mean, I hope it doesn't get obnoxious. I'm just so enthused about what we are able to do if we will just simply try to understand these directions and then do them. I didn't get to the part where he says simple but not easy. This is pretty fundamental, basic stuff. Simple but not easy. A price had to be paid. That meant the destruction. That's not a pretty word. The destruction of self-centeredness. If you're in here hoping that once you decide to get a relationship with God, it's going to be a piece of cake, those words give you a warning. Destruction is painful. And but it's what we have to go through, whether it's a 11-year depression in the case of Bill, or whatever it is that you have to go through, the pain of life changing. Okay, Jennifer, I know you got to go, so stop that recording, and we'll have some open discussion. And I really appreciate you all being here, and I'll look forward to seeing you next Sunday. Oh, I guess I'll go on the scone.